Nigeria. Nigeria is currently the most populous country in Africa with over 220 million people, which makes it a major player not only just on the continent, but globally. Because of its large population and economy, what happens in Nigeria can have effects across Africa and even beyond. It also has one of the largest economies in Africa, largely because of its abundance of natural resources, especially oil. In fact, Nigeria is one of the top oil producers in the world and is part of OPEC, which highlights its importance in the global energy market. However, even with all of these advantages, natural wealth, a large workforce, and economic potential, Nigeria still faces major challenges. Many people live in poverty, the government struggles with corruption and instability, and there are ongoing social issues like limited access to education and healthcare. So while Nigeria has a lot of strengths, there is a big gap between its potential and the reality that many citizens experience on an everyday basis. That's what makes it such an important country to study. To better understand Nigeria's current challenges, it is important to look at its geographic and historical background. Nigeria is located in West Africa and has access to the Atlantic Ocean, which has helped shape its traditions and economic development over time. Nigeria was originally colonized by the United Kingdom and gained independence in 1960. However, the effects of colonial rule are still felt today. During colonization, different ethnic groups were combined into one country without much consideration for their differences, which has contributed to tensions and divisions. Today, Nigeria is extremely diverse, with over 250 ethnic groups. The three largest groups are the Hausa, Fulani in the north, the Yoruba in the southwest, and the Igbo in the southeast. Each group has its own language, culture, and traditions. While this diversity makes Nigeria culturally rich, it can also create challenges, especially when it comes to political unity and resource distribution. In some cases, these differences have led to conflict and competition between groups. So overall, Nigeria's geographical and historical issues, especially colonization and diversity, play a major role in shaping the issues that the country faces today. Before going into detail, this slide gives a quick overview of the main issues Nigeria is facing, which I'll break down throughout the rest of the presentation. The three major areas to focus on are economic, political, and social challenges. First, economically, Nigeria struggles with poverty and inequality, even though it has a large economy and valuable resources like oil. Many people are not benefiting from the country's wealth. Second, politically, corruption and weak governance are major problems. Government institutions often lack transparency, and this affects how resources are distributed and how effectively the country is run. Third, there are several social issues, including limited access to education and healthcare, as well as ongoing conflict in certain regions. These problems directly impact people's lives and overall quality of life. All these issues are connected. For example, political corruption can worsen economic inequality, and economic struggles can increase social tensions. So it's very important to understand how they all interact with each other. Next, I'm going to start by taking a closer look at Nigeria's economic challenges. Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa, which might suggest that it is a very wealthy country. However, that wealth is not evenly shared, and a large portion of the population still lives in poverty. A major reason for Nigeria's economic size is its oil industry. Nigeria is one of the world's top oil producers and is part of OPEC, like I previously mentioned, which gives an important role in the global energy market. Oil brings in most of the country's export revenue and government income. But this dependence on oil has created serious problems, especially in recent years. For example, when global oil prices drop, Nigeria's economy slows down quickly because it doesn't have a strong alternative industry to rely on. At the same time, oil production has also been disrupted by issues such as theft, pipeline vandalism, and conflict in oil-producing regions. Another major issue right now is inflation. Prices for goods like food and fuel have been rising, making it harder for everyday people to afford necessities. The government has also struggled with currency instability, meaning that the value of Nigeria's currency has decreased, which makes imports more expensive. So overall, even though Nigeria has a large and resource-rich country and economy, current issues like overdependence on oil, inflation, and economic instability are making it difficult for the country to achieve steady and inclusive growth. Building off that last slide, one of Nigeria's biggest economic challenges is its heavy dependence on oil, like I mentioned before. Oil makes up around 90% of Nigeria's export earnings, which means the country relies on it for most of its income or trade. This becomes a problem because oil prices are controlled by the global market, When the prices are high, Nigeria earns a lot of the money, but when prices drop, government revenue falls very quickly. This makes the economy very unstable and very unpredictable. Another issue that because so much focus has been placed on oil, other important sectors like agriculture and manufacturing have been underdeveloped. In the past, Nigeria actually had a strong agricultural sector, but over time it has become less of a priority. There are also current challenges affecting oil production itself. For example, oil theft and pipeline vandalism have reduced how much oil Nigeria can export. In addition, conflict in oil-producing regions have made production much less reliable. All of this shows that depending so heavily on one resource is very risky, and without diversifying its economy, meaning developing other industries such as agriculture, Nigeria will continue to face economic instability. Even though Nigeria has a large economy like mentioned in the last two slides, poverty and inequality are major issues. In fact, a significant portion of the population lives below the poverty line, meaning they struggle to afford basic needs like food, housing, and healthcare. One of the main problems is that wealth in Nigeria is very unevenly distributed. A small percentage of the population, often connected to political or business elites, controls a large portion of the country's wealth, while millions of people see little benefit from the country's resources. There's also a big divide between urban and rural areas. In major cities like Lagos, there are more job opportunities and better infrastructure, but in rural areas, people often lack access to basic services like clean water, electricity, and education. This level of inequality creates long-term challenges because it limits social mobility. In other words, it is very difficult for people born into poverty to improve their situation. So even though Nigeria is economically powerful on paper, the reality for many citizens is very different. Youth unemployment is particularly high, and many young people struggle to find stable work even after completing their education. This leads to frustration and a lack of opportunity for millions of people entering the workforce each year. As a result, many young Nigerians turn to alternative options. Some try to migrate to other countries in search of better opportunities, while others may become involved in informal or even illegal activities just to survive. This situation creates a cycle where unemployment contributes to poverty, and poverty makes it harder for people to access education or job training, which then leads to more unemployment. So as we address the issue, there are three main bullet points: economic reforms, fiscal and tax reforms, and social support groups. Economic reforms entail that the government under Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is the current president, he removed fuel subsidies and adjusted exchange rates to stabilize finances for Nigeria. These reforms have reduced deficits and increased foreign reserves, also, however, cause short-term hardships like rising prices. Fiscal and tax reform efforts improve tax collection and reduce debt burdens. It is an overall call to expand the tax base and formalize informal business. Third, social support programs. This is increasing, but is still limited. Investments in cash transfers, food programs, and poverty reduction initiatives. Now moving on to the political side, Nigeria operates as a federal republic, which means power is divided between a central national government and an individual state government. This system is similar to countries like the United States, where different levels of government share authority. Nigeria has a president who serves both as the head of the state and the head of the government. The current president is Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was elected in 2023. In addition to the executive branch, Nigeria also has a legislative branch, which makes the laws, and a judicial branch, which interprets them. So on paper, Nigeria has a democratic system with checks and balances. However, while the structure of the government is democratic, the way it functions in practice is more often complicated than not. Issues like corruption, lack of transparency, and weak enforcement of laws can limit how effective the government actually is. So although Nigeria has the framework of a strong democratic system, there are still significant challenges in how that system operates in reality. One of the biggest challenges facing Nigeria's political system is corruption, and it happens at multiple levels of the government. Corruption means that officials misuse their power for personal gain, and in Nigeria, this has been a persistent issue for decades. For example, Nigeria earns billions of dollars from oil revenue each year, but a significant portion of that money is lost due to mismanagement, bribery, or outright theft. This means that funds that should be used for public services, like building schools, improving roads, or funding hospitals, often don't reach the general population. There have also been major corruption scandals involving government officials and large sums of money. In some cases, funds meant for national development projects have simply disappeared or been redirected into private accounts. Nigeria has tried to combat this through agencies like the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, which investigates financial crimes and corruption cases. While the EFCC has had some success, its efforts are often limited by political interference, meaning powerful individuals are not always held accountable. Another issue is bribery in everyday life. In some cases, citizens may have to pay bribes to access basic services or speed up processes, which creates, obviously, a system where corruption becomes normalized. All of this weakens trust in the government and slows development, because even when resources exist, they are not being used effectively. So corruption is not just a political issue, it directly impacts the economy and the quality of people's life. Another major political challenge in Nigeria is the ongoing instability and security issues. One of the most well-known threats is the extremist group Boko Haram, which operates mainly in the northeastern part of the country. Boko Haram has been responsible for numerous attacks over the years, targeting civilian schools and other governmental organizations. One of the most widely known incidents was the kidnapping of schoolgirls in 2014, which drew international attention and highlighted the severity of the situation. Although Nigerian government has taken military action to weaken the group, Boko Haram and similar organizations are still active today, continuing to carry out attacks and create instability in certain regions. Beyond terrorism, Nigeria also faces other security challenges. Kidnapping for ransom has become more common in different parts of the country, including along major roads and even in schools. Armed groups and criminal networks take advantage of weak law enforcement and economic hardship. There are also conflicts between farmers and herders, especially in central Nigeria. These conflicts are often driven by competition over land and resources, but are made far worse by ethnic and religious tensions. All of these security issues make it difficult for the government to maintain stability and protect its citizens. They also hurt the economy because businesses are less likely to invest in areas where violence is common. So overall, political instability and security threats are major obstacles to Nigeria's development and affect everyday life for many people in Nigeria. Again, addressing the issue, there are three main bullet points: anti-corruption and governance reforms, judicial and constitutional changes, and electoral improvements. So anti-corruption and governance reforms entail that government agencies and international partners are pushing for transparency reforms. However, corruption still remains a major barrier to growth, and corruption as a whole term, as a whole idea, cannot be eradicated in any country, not only just Nigeria. Judicial and constitutional changes mean that courts have strengthened local government autonomy to reduce political interference, so the states in this government have more power. They're getting more power. And finally, electoral improvements. Continued voter registration and reforms to improve election credibility, making sure that voters are valid, and democracy is still functioning, but with concerns about fairness and opposition to strength. Moving on to the social issues, one of the biggest challenges Nigeria faces is its education system. While education has improved over time, there are still major gaps in access to quality. In many rural areas, schools are underfunded and lack basic resources like textbook, trained teachers, and proper facilities. This makes it difficult for students to receive a strong education. In some cases, children may not attend school at all because their families cannot afford it or need them to work. There's also a noticeable gender gap in education. In certain regions, especially in the north, girls are less likely to attend school due to cultural expectations, early marriage, or safety concerns. This limits opportunities for women and attacks long-term development. Security issues also play a role. For example, attacks like the group Boko Haram have specifically targeted schools, which discourages families from sending their children to school out of fear, like previously mentioned in some of the previous slides. As a result, Nigeria has one of the highest numbers of out-of-school children in the world. This creates long-term problems because without education, it is much harder for individuals to find stable jobs and to contribute to the economy. Another major social challenge in Nigeria is its healthcare system, which faces serious limitations in both access and quality. One key issue is the lack of healthcare infrastructure and resources. For example, Nigeria only has about 0.14 hospitals per 1,000 people and around 1.47 nurses per 1,000 people, which is extremely low compared to global standards. Access to healthcare is also very limited. As of 2024, only about 8.9% of the population is covered by national health insurance, meaning that most people have to pay out of pocket for medical care. Government spending on healthcare is another major issue. In 2024, only about 4.6% of Nigeria's national budget was allocated to healthcare, which is far below the 15% target recommended by international agreements. Because of these limitations, many Nigerians struggle to access basic medical care and services. Hospitals are often underfunded, understaffed, and lack modern equipment. In rural areas especially, people have to travel long distances just to see a doctor. Nigeria also faces major public health challenges, including diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, and high rates of maternal mortality. These issues are made worse by weak healthcare infrastructure and, again, limited funding. Overall, even though Nigeria has a large population and an ongoing economy, its healthcare system is still underdeveloped, and improving access to affordable, quality care remains a major challenge for the country. Another major social challenge in Nigeria is the ethnic and religious conflict that is still going on today. Nigeria is extremely diverse with over 250 ethnic groups, and this diversity can sometimes lead to tension and violence. One major divide is between the predominantly Muslim north and the largely Christian south. While many people coexist peacefully, these differences have sometimes contributed to conflict and political tension. In addition, there are ongoing conflicts between farmers and herders, especially in central Nigeria. These conflicts are often caused by competition over land and water resources, but they are also influenced by ethnic and religious differences. These clashes have become increasingly serious. In recent years, thousands of people have been killed and many more have been displaced from their homes due to violence. Groups like Boko Haram, which was previously mentioned, have also contributed to religious and regional instability through extremist violence. So overall, while Nigeria's diversity is one of its greatest strengths, it also creates challenges when there's a weak governance and limited resources, leading to conflict and instability in certain areas. When we address this issue, there are again 3 bullet points: security operations, social and community initiatives, and health and social innovation. So for security operations, Nigeria's military has taken action against insurgents and bandits. Collaboration with local leaders and sometimes international partners has also helped the violence cause. Social and community initiatives, local communities and NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations, step in to provide education, healthcare, and aid. So they're receiving outside care from larger organizations. And finally, health and social innovations. With the introduction of AI, there have been AI-based mental and physical health tools that are helping fill gaps in care and the lack of education for many healthcare professions. So overall, I came up with 4 possible solutions that could be helpful for Nigeria as a whole. Number 1 is to diversify the economy. Number 2 is to strengthen anti-corruption efforts. 3, invest in education and healthcare. And 4, improve security and governance. This is my works cited, and thank you.